What's good? It's your boy Fanon. I'm going to talk about Mikey Garcia today and Errol Spence in the welterweight division. Thank you to the super chats and the new subscribers to the channel. Thank you very much, man. The channel has grown significantly in the last little bit of time. So I wanted to, thank you and welcome all the new subscribers, and thank you to the super chats on the live streams. Now, that said, Mikey Garcia is talking that ish again. And honestly, man, I'm telling you, I think this cat might get what he wants before we get what we want. Or at least Mikey Garcia can get what he wants, it seems, well before I'm going to get what I want out of Errol Spence. So first, let me cover the article that came out. Radio Raheem, shout out to Radio Raheem, always does great interviews. Well, not always, but, nobody's perfect. But Radio Raheem has an article out by on BoxingScene.com, came out earlier this morning, February 21st, 2018. Three-division world champion Mikey Garcia, 37-0 with 30 KOs, says the welterweight division is certainly in his future. Garcia back on March 10th when he goes for his fourth divisional title in a showdown with undefeated junior welterweight champion Sergey Lipinets. Provided he wins, one fight that Garcia wants to do before heading up in weight is a unification with WBA lightweight champion Jorge Linares. Garcia is still technically the WBC's world champion at 135 pounds, although he hasn't fought at the weight limit since January of 2017. He admits that a move to the welterweight division could happen as early as the end of the year, and Garcia has no problem with facing one of the most avoided boxers in any weight class, IBF welterweight champion Errol Spence, 23-0 with 20 KOs. In fact, Garcia is so serious about taking that fight, he states that he would rather secure shot against Spence over a fight with Vasily Lomachenko if both options were on the table for him. And he's certainly eager to face WBC WBA champion Keith Thurman, 28-0 with 22 KOs. I would rather fight Spence if both he and Lomachenko were on the table. It's a bigger challenge, a bigger weight class. People may not take me serious, but I'm coming up to welterweight later. It's going to happen. Whether it's at the end of this year or next year, I'm coming, Garcia told BoxingScene.com. I have to get done with these fights first at lightweight and super lightweight, but I'll be at welterweight soon, and if the opponent is offered and presented, I might be there even sooner. I would love the opportunity to fight Thurman or Spence. If you're going to challenge for a championship, you may as well do it against the best fighter. I don't want to take easy fights. I want something that excites me, that motivates me. A title and a big name motivate me. And if it's Spence or Thurman, those are the biggest names at welterweight. Now, a couple things about this is I've got to put my plug in for my boy as far as unifying at 135 pounds, and that is Robert Easter Jr. I know he wants to unify against Jorge Linares, but I'm not quite sure what's wrong with the IBF belt. I would like to hear somebody say that they want to unify with Robert Easter. It's funny that so many people, that the commentators, not commentators, I don't think they've said it on TV, but the people who talk about the lightweight division, everybody's talking about Jorge Linares, Mikey Garcia, but nobody's talking about Robert Easter. And if Robert Easter is easy and money, as people are saying he is, then somebody should go try to take that belt from him. But it amazes me every time I hear people talk about it. I don't hear about Robert Easter. Even where Vasily Lomachenko talked about if he can't get Jorge Linares, then he looks to, he didn't say this is Bob Arum, for Bob Arum's reason. He looks to Jorge Beltran for the WBO belt. So anyway, that said, I commend Mikey Garcia, and I think that he's serious. I think that he's serious about wanting to move up and fight the best. And as far as whether it would be Lomachenko or Keith Thurman and Errol Spence, he's 100% correct. That is a much bigger challenge moving up to 147 pounds and fighting Errol Spence, or fighting Keith Thurman for that matter. I was listening to Nazeem Richardson talk about Mikey Garcia and Mikey Garcia, his impression of Mikey Garcia. And it was that Mikey Garcia is an excellent boxer and basically gives anybody that he fights a lot of trouble, as long as they're not just so much bigger than him that, that he can't overcome that just, gross size disparity. And he also said the same thing. Nazeem Richardson also said the same thing about Terrence Crawford in the interview that I saw. So, I'll pay, for the sake of this video, I'll pay credence to and acknowledge and defer to Nazeem Richardson, clearly much more knowledgeable about the sport of boxing than I am, or what it takes to win in a boxing ring, having been a coach of Bernard Hopkins, Steve Cunningham, and a bunch of other cats out of Philadelphia, and other cities. I think he also might have been in there with Shane Mosley as well. So, definitely a very accomplished trainer. Now, as far as Mikey Garcia fighting Vasily Lomachenko, if that offer is actually made, I stand pat on what I believe as far as what Top Rank and Bob Arum are trying to do with Vasily Lomachenko. And I think that they're going to try to keep him safe, and they're going to try to keep him winning, because he and Terrence Crawford are the main stars for Top Rank, and Top Rank believes in in-house fights, right? And Mikey Garcia, having worked for 2 years to get away from Top Rank, I find it very hard to believe that Bob Arum is going to go out of his way to try to make a fight between his best guy and Mikey Garcia, who left Top Rank, knowing that Mikey Garcia very well could beat Vasily Lomachenko. And I've heard different opinions about what would happen in that fight, but I'm going to tell you, man, I think that I would give the edge on that to Mikey Garcia, not just because of the size, but because of his camp, his skills, and his camp. I think Robert Garcia is one of the best trainers in boxing. I was very impressed with what Robert Garcia did with Brandon Rios in that Danny Garcia fight. He made a fighter that I thought was completely shot not look shot, right? So I do think they're guiding Mikey smartly, or Mikey at this point is guiding himself very smartly, very intelligently through his career. But if he was to get in there with Lomachenko, I would have to give Mikey Garcia the edge on that, and that's why I don't see that fight. I don't see that fight happening. As far as the Jorge Linares fight, I do see that Jorge Linares bout happening, because I think that, with the exception of the fact that Golden Boy would have to work. Well, I think Al Heyman is an advisor to Mikey Garcia. I'm not sure I think Mikey Garcia also has been fighting under the PBC, so that's going to be definitely on PBC cards. I'm not really up to date as far as what his scenario there is, but Eric Gomez from Golden Boy Promotions said that they would be willing and wanted to give Mikey the money that they wanted, would not ask him to sign options to get that bout. Jorge Linares is getting up there a little bit in age. So Jorge Linares is going to want a big money fight. Mikey, of course, wants to get big money fights, having sat out with all those lawyer fees and not fighting for several years over there when he was trying to get out of Top Rank. So that's a very likely fight for him. I'd like to again put in there that I wish these people start mentioning Robert Easter. But hey, man, that's the bandwagon I'm traveling on right now. I just want to see these guys, all the champions, fight in a weight division. The money is one thing, but from my understanding, good money is getting offered from the PBC side for fights with Robert Easter. Now, as far as why I said in the beginning of this that Mikey Garcia might get what he wants, which is a fight with at least with Errol Spence Jr., provided Errol Spence Jr. can beat Ugas, and that Mikey Garcia beats Sergey Lipinets for the IBF 140-pound title, right? And actually, if those two guys win, then the IBF champion for the the IBF champion for 100 and for 140 pounds would be Mikey Garcia and it would be Mikey Garcia, and the IBF champion for 147 would be Errol Spence Jr. So there's a good chance that those guys, because they're both IBF belt holders, could, parlay that into, a higher mandatory position or a higher ranking at 147 if Mikey Garcia was going to go up there. That's just assuming that he's going to keep that he would keep the IBF belt that Sergey Lipinets has. And I'm pretty sure, I should probably double check. Please forgive me for this. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the IBF champion for light welter, yep, Hunter, it's Sergey Lipinets is the IBF champion. Now the problem happens over here for Thurman. I mean, if he wanted to get in there with Thurman, or the fight that I want to see, and I think a lot of people want to see, is Spence and Thurman, is that the WBC clarified this morning that Keith Thurman has to fight Sean Porter and Danny Garcia. And I've said that I did it in the live stream. I explained it, but Manuel Rivera came out with a quote today, or that from the WBC president Mauricio Suleiman, that explains it very clearly. World Boxing Council President Mauricio Suleiman has revealed that his organization granted a special permit to welterweight champion Keith Thurman so he could make an optional defense on May 19th at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. However, following that voluntary defense, Thurman is then bound to fulfill back-to-back mandatory obligations against Sean Porter and Danny Garcia. On Saturday, Danny won the eliminator against Brandon Rios, but Thurman has a voluntary because of the injury that he had. But after that, he has to do a mandatory with Porter and Garcia. At the end fight from last Saturday, Porter went up into the ring to challenge Garcia, and we're going to see if they're actually going to face each other. But yes, they are two mandatory challengers, Suleiman told ESPN Deportes. Thurman won a close 12-round unanimous decision over Porter in 2016. Then last March, Thurman won a close 12-round split decision over Garcia to unify the WBC and WBA welterweight titles. After that fight, Thurman underwent surgery to correct an elbow injury and has been out of the ring ever since. He has yet to finalize an opponent for his planned return in May. Porter became the mandatory challenger after knocking out Andre Berto in the first half of 2017, and then solidified that position by winning a decision over Adrian Granados in the fall. Garcia also won an eliminator, as previously noted, by knocking out Brandon Rios Saturday night at the Mandalay Bay Center in Las Vegas. After the fight, Porter entered the ring and had a war of words with Garcia on national TV. If Thurman is bound to facing Porter and Garcia in back-to-back fashion, unless Porter and Garcia fight each other, then the showdown between Thurman and IBF champion Errol Spence is not likely till at least the second half of 2019. Now, first of all, that is some bunk. Because, and this is the only beef that I had with this, and this is with the WBC, is that the WBC made a title eliminator out of Danny Garcia and Brandon Rios. Anybody with common sense knew how that bout was going to turn out, that Danny Garcia was going to win that bout. I said that he was going to win by knockout because I couldn't see how in the world Brandon Rios was going to stay clear getting hit with the left hook, but he stayed away from the left hook and got knocked out with the right. So there's no way that the WBC did not know, or at least heavily believe, that they were going to place 3 straight fights for Keith Thurman. before he can have any type of unification. So, that said, if he fights in May, right? So you say May he fights against whoever he fights and he wins. That's going to be at least 4 months, right? At least 4 months before he fights again. So that's June, July, May, August, June, July, August, September. So that's September if he fights then. And if he wins, if he does 4 after that, right? December, that's October, November, December, January. So that's January if he did back-to-back fights within 4 months. That's absolutely positively not going to happen. More than likely, he's going to take at least 6 months in between each fight. So you'll see him fight in May, then you'll see him fight in October, and then you'll see him fight in April, right? Or May of next year against Errol Spence. That's assuming that he actually wins. And that he actually beats that he beats Sean Porter and he beats Danny Garcia, and that then it becomes this fight against Errol Spence becomes a voluntary, which means he still then has to decide. He's been injured. The injury's not gonna. I mean, he's got a rebuilt elbow, right? So I doubt that he's gonna do it He might not fight more than one time this year. This thing, Errol Spence and Keith Thurman could go out to 2020. It could go out to 2020. It could be Deontay Wilder and what Anthony Joshua said about Deontay Wilder. Yeah, it's looking like 2020. And that's if he gets past those two dudes, because he don't say he barely got it. I thought he beat both of those guys, but I tell you this, those are 3 fights those are 3 fights I'm not interested in, man. Those are 3 waste of time fights. 1 voluntary defense against a guy that's more than likely going to be a tomato can. And then 2 bouts against people we already saw him beat. When is the WBA? And that's another thing. When's the WBA going to throw a mandatory in there? Okay, so you got the WBC, right? And say the WBC, if he takes these 3 fights and he has the WBC belt, when's the WBA going to put a mandatory in there? Who's this mandatory? Where's this mandatory defense for the WBA going to happen? That's what I'm saying. It's more than likely not going to go to 2020. Because you're going to have, again, and I know I'm repeating myself, you're going to have this voluntary. Then you're going to probably have 6 more months. And then he'll fight Sean Porter, right? So then he'll have 6 more months until he fights Danny Garcia. Then he's going to have a mandatory then he's going to have a WBA mandatory, right? Then maybe you get Errol Spence, which means that's like 5 fights down the road. Errol Spence is like 5 fights down the road for Keith Thurman. It's bananas, dog. It's bananas. But it is what it is. And that's why I'm saying Mikey Garcia, you got a better shot of seeing Mikey Garcia against Errol Spence Jr. than you got Keith Thurman against him. Just because of that dynamic. Because of the sanctioning bodies and the way that the WBC just stacked 3 fights on top of Keith Thurman. And this is not me even talking about Keith Thurman wanting to or not wanting to fight Errol Spence. He very well could want it. But he's got at least 3 fights before he can do it. And he might have, and more than likely, he's going to have 4 fights before he can do it, because he's the WBC and the WBA champion. So as far as Errol Spence goes, yeah, I think you're going to see Ugas. You're going to see Ugas. You might see maybe they'll go run over. They'll try to get Lucas Matisse in the ring. Maybe Manny Pacquiao. You know what I mean? It's almost as likely that you'll get Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. before you get Keith Thurman. But what I'm hoping, and seriously, if it's all like that, then this is what I'm hoping in order for. I don't want to wish bad things on Keith Thurman, but I bet you. But if Keith Thurman loses to Sean Porter, that shakes all that stuff up, and we'll see unification a lot faster, because it'll divide. It'll at very least Well, no, because he'll wind up having the WB. Sean Porter would be the WBC and the WBA champion, and then the WBC and the WBA have to, slap mandatories on people, right? So it is what it is. But Mikey Garcia has a better. We really do have a better chance of seeing Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence. Yeah, because just because of the way the WBC and the WBA work. And now, do I really think that Mikey Garcia is going to move up and do that? No, I don't. I think that Mikey Garcia would probably put himself in a position to maybe be in another mandatory for the WBC or the WBA, but he'd have to be a voluntary. Now, if he got in the ring with Errol Spence, I mean, that's career ending, if you ask me. But I don't doubt that he would have the pride to do so because he comes from a fighting community where they're going to give him a lot of respect for just having, the fortitude to try to do it. And with that, I'm out. Much respect to Mikey Garcia for even saying that, though. Peace.